Hello, I'm Steve Hemmond from the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools, MARS. As part of our professional development program, we are producing video clips that will present different aspects about the operation of regional school districts from the viewpoint of school committee members, superintendents, and business administrators, as well as staff. This program is titled Financial Audits for School Districts. I really want to point out that it really is the responsibility of the superintendent to make sure that this takes place and get the program on the audit moving and brought to the attention of the school committee. For this program, we have Stacy Jackson and Julie Kelly. Stacy is a former member of the Wachusett Regional School District Committee, and Julie is also a former member of the Wachusett School Committee. It's my pleasure to introduce Stacy Jackson and Julie Kelly.
Thanks, Steve. Next slide, please. Today we're going to talk about the audits and what's necessary according to law and how to choose an audit firm and some of the findings and how they're presented. So in terms of the requirements for audits, according to Section 16E, a regional school district shall be considered a district for the purposes of conducting periodic audits under Sections 35, 38, 39, 40, 41, and 42 of Chapter 44. Upon the completion of each audit, a copy shall be sent to the Chief Executive Officer and the school committee of each city or town that is a member of the district. The cost of each audit shall be appropriated among the several cities and towns that are members of the district in the same manner as the annual expenses of the district. Every school district shall, within 9 months of the close of the fiscal year, arrange for and undergo an independent audit of the financial records and submit the report of this audit to the department. The audit will be conducted at minimum in accordance with the compliance supplement for Massachusetts school districts issued by the department. The department may waive the requirement of an annual compliance supplement audit for an elementary school district that only has one school. So what this is saying is each regional school district shall do the audit, shall have it done, it shall be presented to school committee and shared with all of the member towns. So that is necessary for school districts. Next slide, please. What you need to audit is you need to hire an auditing firm to conduct the following on a yearly basis. So again, every single year these must be done. There must be a single audit of all financial activity, including the federal grants. There needs to be an audit of your end of the year report, which is very important, and an audit of student activity accounts. In larger districts, you can do 2 or 3 schools per year, but those student accounts should be audited on a regular basis. Next slide, please. Well, audit services are not subject to the procurement provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 30B. It is recommended that school committee issue a request for a proposal, so the scope of services can be clearly defined. You really need to outline for potential auditors what you're looking for them to do. The auditing firm should be expected to conduct the audits in a timely manner, to meet state regulations and deadlines, to travel to present their findings in open session of the school committee, and be available throughout the length of the contract to answer questions and provide guidance to the superintendent, business manager, and school committee upon request. So what's really important here is the school committee is hiring the audit firm. And it's very important that the school committee representatives understand that the audit firm is working for them, the school committee representatives. We've heard from school committee members that they don't know who their audit firm is, or they're not comfortable going to them to address any concerns. You know, we really encourage school committee members, if you have concerns about the financial management of your system, of your district, sit down with your auditors, share your concerns with them. You're the one that knows what's going on there, and if there's any areas that you want the audit firm to take a look at, definitely go in and meet with them and ask them to look at certain things. We also want to recommend that you change your auditors every few years. We've seen some districts where they've had the same audit firm for several years in a row, 6, 8, 10 years. The problem with that is you want to mix it up every few years. You want a fresh set of eyes looking at your books and looking at your best practices. And you also don't want your business manager becoming super chummy with the audit firm. There are independent people that are coming in to look at best practices in your district and see what's going on. So you really do want a fresh set of eyes, and you want someone that's going to independently look at that and give an assessment of that.
I would add one of the things is that once the audit is complete, that the auditors must appear or should appear be it to the school committee in an open session, present the report, what their findings are, especially the management letter, and present all of those in an open session. Don't rely and say, okay, they can just send it in. No, they really need to present to the school committee face-to-face at a public meeting.
And then the other thing, when they do come to present, you really want them to talk about their previous year's findings or the finding of a previous audit firm, because you want to make sure whatever recommendations are put forth in that management letter, that your district business office is following up with those recommendations. Those are very important if they're making the management letter. So you want to make sure that all those recommendations are carried forward. So that's something that's very important for school committee members to continue asking about throughout the year, is what's going on in terms of meeting the compliance and meeting those recommendations that have been made in the past. Next slide, please. So there's a number of questions that we can recommend when you are looking to hire a new auditing firm. Is you want to ask about what kind of experience the firm has auditing specifically regional school districts, because as we all know, regional school districts operate very differently than standalone districts or municipalities. So that's an area of expertise that you would like to have your audit firm have, is expertise in specifically regional school districts. You also want to look at the size of the budget that they have the most experience with. If I'm a very large regional school district and I'm hiring an auditing firm who has only had experience with very small districts, that's a concern. So you want to take a look at that, because a very large district is going to have a lot more information to take a look at. There's a lot more staff members, and you might need more folks from the audit firm to come out and really do a thorough assessment there. You also want to look at the experience of the staff of the audit firm that would be assigned to your district, and if there's any expected turnover. A lot of times when you get a request for proposal and you get those proposals in, the audit firm is talking about the resumes of their partners in the firm, but those partners may or may not be involved in the audit. So you want to find out who actually within the audit firm would be doing your audit, and you want to make sure that at least one of the partners is present when it's presented to the school committee, and that they're an active participant in writing the audit findings, so you have a connection there and someone that you can go to with questions throughout the process. Next slide, please. You also want to make sure they have knowledge and experience with Massachusetts municipal finance regulations, especially if it's an out-of-state auditing firm. You want to make sure they have experience with the Massachusetts laws and regulations. And the length of time that the auditing firm expects to be in the district, compiling information and interviewing staff. Again, if you have a very small budget, that's going to require a lot less time that they're going to be on site. But if you have a very large budget and a lot of complex systems there, then a thorough audit is going to take a lot more time to complete. You know, it can be anywhere from a couple days with a small district to several weeks with a larger district, so something to keep in mind there. And Julie's going to talk about more of the specifics.
Next slide, please. So the single audit process, just to clarify that the auditors, when they come in, are taking a snapshot in all of the financial activity between July 1st and June 30th. So it's not going to match your budget. It's all of the financial activity that occur after July 1st and on through June 30th. So it's going to include financial activity that belongs to the previous fiscal year throughout the year. So if you're trying to match it up to your budget, that's not going to work, but they can gladly explain that to you. Your single audit process, the auditors usually begin requesting data transfer from the district to their software before the end of the fiscal year to set up programming to run the audit, and that sometimes starts happening in May. The auditors should make themselves available for consult with the school committee upon request to discuss areas of concern the committee may have and areas they want the auditors to give more attention to. So if you feel like you're having some issues with your cafeteria accounts, or if you or your withholding accounts, you would just let them know, we have some concerns, can you take some more samples from those areas, and they will gladly do so. The auditors schedule time to come into the district anytime between September through January, and note that's usually the busiest time of the year for the auditing firm. They usually wait till September because they want to make sure that you've closed out your federal grants, which usually doesn't occur till the end of August. Next slide, please. The auditing teams begin audit by conducting a risk assessment of the district. This involves interviews with the business manager, his or her staff, and sometimes the superintendent. The auditor is looking for clear separation of duties. Accounts receivable is not handled by the same staff who does accounts payable. Strong business policies and procedure manuals and audit controls in the district financial software. And what that means is not everybody can write a check, not everybody can transfer funds. There are clear audit controls in that software where only certain people have access to certain areas. If any of those issues are not best practice, the risk of the audit increases, which will dictate the amount of samples the auditors must pull and the length of time the auditors are on site. So when they begin the presentation of the audit, you might want to raise your hand as a school committee member and ask, how did you find this district? How did you place them as a risk assessment? When you did your risk assessment, what risk did you find them at? Next slide, please. So something to be concerned about. The concern with using the same auditing firm as Stacy had stated, more than 5 years, is that the risk assessment done at the beginning of the audit may not be as thorough as it should be. So the auditors become very comfortable with your business office staff. And the audit, it may reflect that comfort level. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends that outside auditors be changed every 5 to 8 years. And I think the state auditor would like to see that every 3 years, 3 to 5 years. We strongly support that recommendation. Things change in a business office. Staff come and go. And if you have an auditor that knows the business manager and they're coming in and they don't do a risk assessment because things could have changed, you could have the same staff member doing certain jobs and the separation of duty changes or slides. They're not may necessarily ask those questions, and it's very important that they ask those questions because this isn't a gut-you study. This is a best practice study. We want to make sure that your district is practicing best financial practices, and the only way they can do that is if they assess the risk right away and they're doing the samples accordingly. When an auditing firm has done their work on site, they conduct an exit interview with the business office staff and the superintendent to provide some very basic overviews of their findings. And in some districts, unfortunately, there's a little negotiation that goes on. If a school committee member or members are not present to hear that, it should be, here's our basic findings, and the superintendent and the business manager hears that, and they get prepared to provide official feedback. You want to make sure that you have a school committee member present. That meeting should not occur without someone either being conference called in or present at the meeting. Now, I'm not saying it's a problem in every district, but some districts, in Wachusett, it was a problem, and we had a financial issue, and we found out this happened. We actually have an audit advisory board that wasn't even aware the exit interview was happening. So it's just something you should be aware of, in that your business and finance chair or your school committee chair may want to be a part of that conversation. We highly recommend that you are a part of that conversation. Next slide, please. The auditing firm will complete and forward to the superintendent and the chair of the school committee their draft findings, which will be presented in several reports. And the first is your management letter, which is their areas of concern discovered during the audit and the level of that concern, whether it's a material finding, which you never want to see, what they feel needs to be done to fix it. They also do touch upon their findings for the previous year and whether or not those areas were rectified or not. And then your basic financial statements, which is a complete analysis of all your financial activities, statement of assets and liabilities, your breakdown of your debt, and your OPEB liability. This is such an important document for school committee members to become familiar with. This is all of your information about your financial activity in your district, and your debt, and your OPEB liability. It's a document that you should know well. And lastly is your financial statements for your federal awards. You never want to see any findings there because material findings and financial statements for federal awards could mean you lose your federal money. So you want to make sure you look at that and everything looks okay. That's your audit of your federal grants. The business manager and superintendent is given time to respond to the auditors on the areas of disagreement noted in the management's letter, which the auditors may or may not take into consideration. But usually they note what the district's response is and is regardless in the final audit. And as a school committee member, you should ask for your business manager to come up with a corrective action plan for any findings that the auditing firm may find. Next slide, please. The auditors should be invited to an open session of your Business and Finance Subcommittee or a full school committee meeting to present their findings and answer your questions. We strongly recommend that the committee schedule a meeting specifically for this presentation, and that the committee request the auditors go over their audit page by page so that the committee fully understands the report and the financial status of their district. Auditors actually enjoy discussing their work, and they welcome the chance to explain to the committee their findings in detail. I was the chair of the Audit Advisory Board. The basic financial statement is an overwhelming statement if you are not an accountant. And I asked my first year to have the auditors, please explain your work to me. Let's go page by page. It was a 2-hour meeting. They absolutely were happy and thrilled to do it. And I left that meeting completely understanding my audit report. So I highly recommend that you do that. Once the presentation is complete, the committee votes to accept the report as final, and the chair signs a statement it was accepted. The auditors then release a report as final, and the committee forwards the audit to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and to all member towns.
I would add at the end of that report is when the E&D, that they take a look as unencumbered funds that are available that will go into E&D, and then from that you have to send a report into the Department of Revenue to get that certified. So you can't get it certified, your E&D certified, until your audit is complete.
Next slide, please. The end of the year report audit process. The end of the year, once filed to DESI, end of year report by September 30th, is then forwarded to the auditing firm to be audited for accuracy, which is the expectation of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Auditors would forward a draft management letter to the chair of the school committee and superintendent once the audit is complete, advising of their findings if they have any. And unless you have a really large district, you sometimes don't be surprised if there aren't any findings at all. They will not come and present. It's usually just an informal letter of their draft findings. The full committee reviews and votes on the acceptance of the draft, and the auditors then release the final report. The superintendent then forwards the final audit to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
And I would add on that report, in the end of year report, that has to be sent in. And if it's not sent in and they don't receive it, they could withhold Chapter 70 funds. So it's absolutely important that audit report, that they get the audit material. And again, a lot of times you can have your auditor will take the responsibility to make sure it gets sent in. I know the last time I was interim superintendent, it was sent in by them, and we made sure that it went in. So it can be done. So you work closely with your auditor.
And the last slide is our student account, activities account audits. We are going to do a separate presentation on that issue.
I would add very closely, it would add at the end for here, is that to make sure that you closely watch your audit, and especially the management letter as superintendent and business manager, and then when you get it, you start correcting the issues that are there, and then presenting those to the school committee as well as member towns if they ask about it. The other thing on the audit is to make sure that the selectmen and the finance commissions or advisory boards in each town get a copy of it, being very transparent so they can see exactly what was happening. So.
Thank you for your time, and stay tuned for future presentations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.